Hey, what's going on, guys? Fizz here. So this is going to be the first build diary of Sentinel League. This is, by the name, you could probably guess, Physics Boneshatter MTX, please. I'm a little bit salty that Shockwave, a support gym, got MTX before a skill gym did, but hey, whatever, that's not relevant. Before we get into things, I just want to say, if you see the video and you want to, like, after you're done watching, you want to see more of it or whatever, I do stream every day over on Twitch, and I will be live right after this video goes up on YouTube. And if you enjoy the video and you have enjoyed my past content, maybe consider subscribing. It does help me. With 30 seconds of pre-shill speed run out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into a map, and I'll kind of talk a little bit about the build as we run through here. And yeah, once we get out, we'll get into the nitty-gritty details of gyms and, you know, passive tree and all sorts of stuff like that. So this is Boneshatter Slayer. This is a pretty common build at this point, I would say. Cat aggro. I guess relatively meta, right? Like, this skill is one of the most, if not the most prevalent melee skill in HCSSF currently. So I don't know, Boneshatter is weird for me. I played it last league a little bit. I was gonna make a build diary series onto it, and I forgot. Nice. So it has really good bursts, as you can probably see. However, the biggest thing that the biggest issue I have with Boneshatter is, like, in my brain, I don't know in practice, in my brain, I feel like it will be terrible for endgame bosses just because of how it functions. Obviously, like, no passive damage, slightly, like, long wind up on the hit. You know, like a boss like Cirrus that jumps around a lot, feels like it's gonna be really painful. Now, that isn't gonna be completely true, because one thing that people kind of take for granted, or maybe don't realize much on Boneshatter, is the crazy strike range that you have. So you can actually hit bosses, or just, you know, monsters in general, from a very far distance away. So it's not like that old video of Quinn trying to kill Awakener with Helix, and, like, he just keeps teleporting away to the other side of the screen, and he can't hit him with anything, and he's, like, raging at that. It's not really like that with Boneshatter. You will have problems. Sorry. Slayer Leech OP. You will have problems with bossing, but it's like uptime, I don't think is really going to be that big of an issue, just because of how far away you can attack. So that's a map out of the way. I will say first and foremost that for the most part, I'm basically just following Karn's guide that he has over on Zizarin's channel. I can link to it down below. I'm sure if you're watching this video, there's like a 0% chance that you don't know who Zizarin is. But I'm basically just following that POB. I mean, Karn's been playing this build over and over and over and over and over for like the past how many leagues now. So doesn't, you know, there's no reason to try to reinvent the wheel on something that's already pretty solved. So first and foremost, I guess we'll go over the passive tree. It's very, very basic. I will link my current character POB down below, and then I'll link to Zizarin's, like, guide video that he did with Karn, because I don't want to just yoink the POB from that video. That seems like it would be in poor taste, so I'll just link the video, and then from that video you can get the, like, guide version of their POB and all that stuff. I can't speak for the leveling trees or anything like that. I basically just did standard melee leveling and then swapped over. I basically have Karn's POB for, like, a precise technique thing, because he does swap into that later on, and I've not messed around with precise technique at all since it came out. So it's more for reasons like that. I can't really speak on, like, early game or leveling stuff. I'm just kind of looking at, like, super endgame trees. That out of the way, basic nodes here. There's not a whole lot to really go over. Going down from start into Art of the Gladiator. Destroyer is really, really nice on Boneshatter. Destroyer is really good on, like, every two-handed melee build, but it's extra good on Boneshatter because of the stun duration, which will help with clear and stuff like that. So, Pantheon over. Right now, I do have Bastion Breaker anointed. Eventually, I'm going to spec into this with passive points, but this is, like, your only source of overwhelm right now. Once you actually spec into this, you grab the Fizz Mastery with Impale on hit. You know, you're not, like, full sending it on Impale investment, but it is nice to have a little bit. It is a damage gain. So running Hatchet Master, that's how we're getting Onslaught. My Axe Masteries right now are 1 rage on hit and Onslaught effect. Other than that, Wrecking Ball, as you do, again, a bunch of stun duration, tons of attack speed, damage, very efficient node with the two-hand mastery for increased damage against rare and unique enemies. Golem's Blood is life. That's this node down here. Obviously running Prismatic Skin. Why would you not? Tons of max res. Going on up here into Heart of the Warrior and Born to Fight. Born to Fight, really, really good node. It's great having a bunch of damage, attack speed, strength, which is life, all in one little node, and then grabbing armor and stuff from Marauder start. Onwards over here, we have Slaughter. I mean, all of this is like very, very basic. This is very cookie cutter, like axe melee tree. And obviously Resolute Technique. Now, once I swap over to Precise Technique, obviously I'll be speccing out of Resolute Technique and then grabbing things like Versatility to get more accuracy. I have tried to swap to it, but currently I'm a little bit short. So if you don't know how Precise Technique works, you need to have more accuracy than life, which does make it a little bit tricky when you're on the borderline for swapping into it, because if right now I get 5400 accuracy with the gear and, you know, precision and everything on, then I can run Precise Technique. But then I level up and I gain life and I no longer have enough accuracy. So I'm not getting anything from Precise Technique. So it's really, it can be a balancing act. It's annoying. It does take good gear to be able to do it. You need very high accuracy rolls on a lot of your gear. So it is something you swap into later. Now, what does Precise Technique do exactly? Obviously, since you're accuracy stacking, accuracy is no longer an issue, so you don't need Never Miss from, or hits can't be evaded from Resolute Technique. So Precise Technique is basically just 40% more multi on your damage, your attack damage specifically, so this won't work for ailment builds like bleed and whatnot. But for any attack-based build, it's gonna be good for, for whatever. So on Slayer, it's really easy to accomplish this. I'm not like a huge believer in Precise Technique in general, but on Slayer, it's probably one of the best ascendancies to get this with, because with Impact, you have 50% increased global accuracy rating, which is a ton. It significantly lowers the gear requirement to be able to run it, but it is still quite high even on Slayer. So basically the way that you're gonna achieve Precise Technique, enough accuracy to run it, is grabbing Versatility, using precision, and then that's pretty much it. And then obviously having a bunch of accuracy rolls on your gear. That's pretty much the passive tree. If you guys are curious on ascendancies, typical Slayer leveling, Bane of Legends into Headsman, into Brutal Fervor, and finally Uber Lab, you pick up Impact. Now, what these nodes specifically do: Bane of Legends makes you immune to Fizz Reflect, and it gives you more damage. Headsman is Cull, which is really nice. Also attack speed and move speed for better clear. Brutal Fervor, this is Slayer Overleech. Nothing more really needs to be said there. This is like one of your biggest, your biggest defensive layer on the build. And then Impact. So Impact is what is going to give you a ton of extra strike range. It's going to give you a ton of AoE while clearing, gives you a ton of extra damage for bossing, and your accuracy, which will let you run Precise Technique. However, you don't really want to pick this up until Uber Lab, because almost all of that is quality of life and not necessary. You don't need the accuracy until way later when you're swapping to Precise Technique. Melee strike range doesn't matter while leveling through the axe. AoE is quality of life, but not really mandatory, especially when, you know, compared against all these other nodes. And finally, 50% more melee damage based on proximity. It's basically like a budget close combat that you get on your Ascendancy node for free. It just doesn't hold weight against these other ones. And like delaying Culling Strike or delaying Overleech in favor of Impact, which is basically what you would have to do, is not ideal at all, because you're either losing tons of defense or tons of damage, effectively. So, with the passives and the ascendancies out of the way, let's move on to gear. So, I have a hypothesis that all of the RNG that I was not getting on my Detonate Dead character was instead secretly being funneled away, a la Ranking of Kings style, onto the next character I was going to be making. Because my Boneshatter RNG has been absolutely wild. I was trying to 5-link my chest piece, and I hit it with 6-link and like 30 fusings. I got a crazy axe, I got a crazy helmet, like just tons and tons of gear just kind of fell in my lap while leveling. So I got this unveil, which is a really nice unveil, especially for like early game. 105 life on this chest piece with a unveiled 10% max life and spell sup on it. It also has strength, which is really good because that 45 strength is effectively like 22, 23 life as well. So it's like 130 life chest piece with 10% max life and spell sup. Obviously, the only downside here is that there is no resists and there's no open craft for, you know, a resist slot or anything like that. There's no open suffixes and open prefixes. However, it is pretty decent. It also got a hybrid armor and evasion roll. While not super high, it's only tier 5. It does give me a little bit over 1,000 combined armor and evasion, which is pretty good. Moving on to the helmet. So this helmet with this enchant, I didn't get this. I dropped this on my Detonate Dead character, by the way, from Sentinel. So this was a Sentinel reward that dropped. Now, I crafted the helmet, but the helmet itself was a fluted bassinet, item level 83, that dropped with lab enchant for Boneshatter damage. Well, obviously, I gotta use that, right? So basically, I just hit this with loathing essences. You don't need loathing essences. I was just kind of like going through essences that I had that, you know, might be beneficial at the time. And I hit basically tier 1 life, tier 3 hybrid, which ended up at 114 max life. Tier 2 spell sup at 19%. And then here's the crazy thing. Tier 2 hybrid armor evasion. So again, a ton of armor and evasion on this helmet. And a tier 2 accuracy roll, which at the time I had no intentions of going precise technique, but I feel like I might need to go that route in order to have like better damage endgame. So it's crazy that I got all that and the accuracy, and I wasn't even trying to get the accuracy. It just, again, it fell in my lap. It was really cool. So moving on to the boots. The boots are kind of whatever. These are pretty garbo. These were like, this was a pair of boots that I had that I was saving for a recombinator. To like craft like my end game pair of boots, like the perfect set of boots for my Necro, but obviously Necro is dead now, so I just threw it on the Slayer when I got to maps because it was better than the leveling pair of boots I was using. Obviously the regen life roll does literally nothing because we have all packed. However, you know, high roll move speed, high roll lightning res, spell sup, and then we crafted on life. My belt's kind of whatever as well. A lot of these pieces are like, you know, like early game level pieces that have like 1 or 2 decent stats, and everything else is just kind of fluff. Same thing here. We have a tier 2 life roll with a decent fire and lightning roll, and then a open prefix for armor evasion craft because there's nothing else you can really do with prefixes on belts. So these gloves are an interesting one. They're good, but they're not at the same time. So I actually, with all my other gear and having taken Entrench on the tree for spell sup, I need exactly 11% to cap spell suppression. So I am already spell suppression capped. However, these gloves don't offer me a lot else. 55 life is okay. A good cold res roll is also okay. And they did have an open prefix for damage while leeching, which is a really good mod to have on Slayer, obviously, because overleech means you just always get this damage. However, it's probably going to be one of the first pieces I try to replace simply because I am hurting really badly on chaos res right now. In fact, balancing resistance in general on this build seems to be very hard, especially once you go for precise technique, because accuracy, and you need to stack it everywhere, is a suffix roll. So the way that ends up working is you always have to have at least one suffix blocked off for accuracy in a lot of slots. And that ends up like largely limiting your like ability to roll resistances on stuff. It's very noticeable because especially on main pieces of gear, you already need spell suppression, right? So that's 2 suffixes locked out to begin with before you can worry about resists. So resists tend to be, from what I've noticed, really hard if you have any aspirations of going precise technique at some point. So I'm gonna need to get better gloves relatively soon. Excuse me. Moving on to the amulet. Amulet's super whatever. I needed life and res, so I just took the first thing that I got, anointed Bastion Breaker on it. There's nothing special here at all. Life and res on the amulet. We're running turquoise because we need dex and int. More so int than anything else, but dex is needed too. What else? The rings. So these rings are just like holdover backup pieces of gear that I found on the Necro. Strength, evasion, really whatever, mana, whatever. It's a 2-stone with 13 to all res and open prefix for life. And then on this amethyst ring, this one's actually a pretty good ring. It's a tier 1 life roll with 16% all res, 13% cold res, and an open prefix for Elrion Craft, which you are going to need at least one of those for this build. And even still then, I can sometimes, like when I'm like blowing everything on a boss and just sitting there hitting, I run out of mana very quickly. I will say this ring is kind of sad in a way because it doesn't have an accuracy roll on it, which means I am going to need to replace it very likely in order to run precise technique. Kind of sucks. But it is what it is. Like rolling, I've noticed that rolling the rings for accuracy is the most annoying thing thus far. It's really hard to get a basically like a tier 2 or a tier 1 accuracy roll while also having a usable ring in other facets, especially like I mentioned before, getting enough resists with, you know, your suffixes already being limited in that way. So it's really annoying because there's not even like a way to focus it with essences, because like there's no essences that give accuracy. There is the one that gives like evasion, but it gives like evasion on almost every piece, and it gives accuracy on like weapons and quiver or something. So it's like not even like, it's not remotely useful to this build at all. Moving on to the weapon. So this weapon I actually hit with a attack speed essence. I don't remember the name of it right now, but I was hitting it with attack speed essences because I was out of contempts. So tier 2 attack speed guaranteed. I hit tier 3 flat fizz, tier 6 hybrid, and then I just, you know, threw on a Exalt Craft fizz damage mod. And then this is like a little bit shy of 700 PDPS. Funnily enough, the two dead mods here are a ton of lightning and cold res, which I actually need. So they're not dead mods at all. It's actually very useful. So whenever I end up replacing this, I'm going to be very sad because I'm going to be taking a massive hit to my resistances. That being said, right now it's a little bit shy of 700 PDPS. However, it can get a lot higher. It's 20% qual, not 28 or 30% quality. So you can get a lot of damage there. As you can see here, my rolls are actually quite low. My flat fizz roll and my crafted percent fizz roll are both basically bottom rolls. The percent fizz is not literally a bottom roll, but it is quite low. And then the flat fizz roll on the high end is a bottom roll. So I can get actually a lot more damage out of this axe. But by no means will this be the end game axe. So that's everything for the gear. If you guys have any questions on any of it, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and get into all of the sockets real quick. Before I do, I will show you guys real quick. My current resists, I'm 101 for fire, 136 for cold, 102 for lightning, and negative 27 for chaos. Now, the only reason I'm getting away with being in like low reds with this level of chaos res is simply Slayer Overleach is carrying that very hard. I was slightly positive in chaos res with my last pair of gloves. Excuse me. But I swapped them out for these because the last pair of gloves, they had a ton of chaos res and decent life, but they didn't have any spell sup. So basically, I gave up a bunch of chaos res to get spell sup cap. That feels like it's more important because it's more universal in terms of its defense. However, chaos res is currently the biggest issue that I need to solve, and it is like a very glaring one at that. So yeah, balancing resist has been annoying. TLDR. Moving on, we're gonna go over the gym links. In the helmet, we have Molten Shell with Warlord's Mark with the cast 1 damage taken setup. As you guys know, I typically always run a 211 setup. A 1 in 10 is fine. Those tend to be the most common. I prefer 211. Warlord's Mark. I didn't raw quality this. You don't need to because you have endurance charge generation via Inexorable. However, I just, again, another Sentinel drop. I just dropped a max quality Warlord's Mark, so I'm using it. Why not, right? And then our last gym socket here is increased duration support for increased duration on our Molten Shell when it procs. For our links in Boneshatter, we're running Boneshatter. Now this one, I did just like raw hit this with GCPs to hit 20 qual because I wanted faster clear. And Sentinel just like spits out GCPs like heist. It's crazy. I've had no shortage of GCPs. On the DD character, I literally raw GCP'd every support gym to 20% qual. I didn't have to flip them. Like it's ridiculous how many GCPs you get if you go for gym reward. Anyway, so we have Boneshatter linked with Ruthless, Brutality, Close Combat, Melee Fizz, and Fortify. Now, before someone asks for leveling links, your leveling 4 link is going to be like Boneshatter, Ruthless, Fortify, and then probably Close Combat, excuse me. If you don't have a green and you have 4 red instead, then use Melee Fizz until you can use Brutality, and then probably just use Brutality so you don't have to deal with the less damage attack speed mod of more Melee Fizz. Excuse me. And the boots, Berserk, Determination, Pride, and Ancestral Cry. These obviously don't need to be together. They're just lots of red sockets. In my gloves, I'm running multiple totems with Ancestral Protector and Maim. Eventually, Maim will go out, and then Precision with Arrogance will go in, so we can run Precision to get enough accuracy to use Precise Technique. In the axe, we have, and again, none of this really matters either. These links, nothing needs to be linked. We have Ancestral War Chief, War Banner, Flame Dash, Blood Rage, faster attacks, and Leap Slam. So obviously the only thing that needs to be linked out of any of this is Leap Slam and faster attacks. But outside of the totem links here on your gloves and the faster attacks on Leap Slam, every other gem in the weapon and the boots can just be thrown around wherever. They don't need to be together at all. Now, I will say, make sure that you can throw like Ancestral War Chief in your gloves or, you know, wherever with your totem setup. Just make sure they're not linked, because if you use Ancestral War Chief totem and it's linked to multiple totems, then you'll lose both of them. So it will take both charges of your Vol Ancestral War Chief, which, if you don't know, does not double your damage, the more melee damage mod that it gives you. You can only have one of those active at a time. Now, I'm pretty sure that Ancestral War Chief and Vol Ancestral War Chief, the damage stacks there, but you can't have two Vol Ancestral War Chiefs and get like double dip on that more melee damage multi. So yeah, make sure it's not linked to multi totems. Your Vol Ancestral War Chief, that is. You want your Ancestral Protector totem to be linked. That's all the links. And I guess real quick, Flasks, it's super basic. Jade Flask, Granite Flask, Quicksilver Quartz. Try to get things. You want charge gain on hit, as always. Try to get a, increased armor during Flask effect, increased evasion during Flask effect, reduce effective curses, reduce effective shock, and then probably CB removal. I usually prefer to put it on my life flask. Now, I rush, like as soon as I got into maps, like my first map, I just rushed Peruna, cannot be frozen. If you don't have this Pantheon yet, then you need to obviously craft freeze immune on your flasks. I'm also using Garukon right now, so I mean, basically I am shock immune while running through maps, because while my flasks are up, I have 51% here, 60% here. Shock effectiveness can go over 100% with some of the new Arch Nemesis mods. It is also a very real threat that can happen frequently, but I am relatively over 100% here pretty comfortably, so it's not too much of an issue. Past that, I think that's everything. Now, future goals for the character. Basically, I just want to get, hopefully by the end of the stream that's about to start, I would like to have my Chaos Res fixed first and foremost. After that, I would like to get all the accuracy gear I need so I can be Precise Technique within the next stream. And then from there, we'll see how things go. Some gear definitely needs to get replaced. So once I get my Chaos Res in a good spot and I get my accuracy in a good spot and I can start running Precise Technique, the character is going to be super beefy. I'm already handling low reds right now with absolutely no issues in terms of damage. The only annoying thing is super juiced essence monsters, especially if my Sentinel hits them. I don't think this is a problem specifically to Boneshatter, though. I think this is just a problem for every build in the game that isn't DD or like Seismic Trap. But we'll see how long I play the character, how long I go with it, because Boneshatter has this weird issue with me where, like, I love playing it, but I'll only play it for a few days and then I move on. And I think it's just me as a, like, very, like, boss-centric player. I love to just kind of, like, try to rush bosses on stuff. That builds that primarily focus on, like, map clearing and have, like, what I would say to be very obvious flaws when it comes to bossing, tend to not hold my attention very well. If you're wondering why I started leaning down, my cat's trying to push the power button on my PC. So I'm trying to defend my recording right now. Past that, I don't know. I want to try to take it pretty far. I think the ceiling on the build is actually pretty high. It's just, the gear and time required. I don't know if my attention span will last, because there's a bunch of other build diaries I want to do. None of them super revolutionary, right? I've actually been toying with the idea of doing like EA totems since I didn't play that last league. I haven't played it since Scourge League, I think, before it like really popped off and was super popular. And back then I played it on a high row. and I hated it because of Hydrosphere and having to micromanage a Hydrosphere. But obviously that's not a problem anymore. So I've been debating playing around with it, especially since we're early in the league, and you kind of just want to stick to the meta stuff, especially in HCSSF right now because of how ridiculous the game is tuned. You could argue that some of the most of the Arch Nemesis mods aren't very offensive anymore. I would agree with that in terms of how squishy they tend to be. However, it's still greatly unbalanced when it comes to its interaction with other league mechanics. Having to kill, 2 to 3 essence monsters per map, when that's interacting with Arch Nemesis, it's ridiculous. Arch Nemesis mods with Sentinel are ridiculous. Arch Nemesis mods with Legion are ridiculous. Just like every league mechanic. So it's we're not in the clear. Stuff is still like super wacky balance wise, not remotely in a good spot in my opinion. So I think I should do like the more like meta build diaries towards the beginning of the league when balance is at the funkiest, and hopefully as the league draws on, I can start to experiment with some of the like wacky build diary ideas I have once things are more in line balance wise. And I guess one last thing, axes versus maces on this build, because it's probably going to be that was not an intentional pun. I promise it was not an intentional pun. It's probably going to be asked at some point. Basically, axes are going to give you easier access to attack speed and damage. I think axes are just no debate better early on. In the current state of the game, basically maces are going to give you a lot more defense from like very strong and very long stuns, especially in things like harvest. This is going to be a huge deal. Those cracked essence monsters I were talking about, you're going to be able to permanently stun those if you go mace, so it's very defensive. And then chill, all sorts of stuff like that. So maces are going to be very defensive. Realistically, maces technically clear faster in a way, because you get so much more like of a stun, meaning the shockwaves are going to be bigger. But realistically, you're not like, you could see like I'm running through the map and I'm already exploding the whole screen. I don't have +1 strike on my gloves or anything either. So you know what I mean? Like your AoE will be bigger, but it's not like, I don't really think you're going to notice the difference because of how ridiculous Boneshatter is anyway when it comes to clearing. So yeah, it's just basically a lot more defensive, and in the current meta, probably better to run maces end game. But it's just that, run that end game. Once you're very comfortably in T16s and stuff like that, you want to transition into more end game stuff. I would also be wary of doing like super high tier harvest on axes, because you're not going to be able to stun monsters, and some of the like, you can still do high tier harvests, but I can definitely see how it would be like a ticking time bomb to do harvests with axes right now versus just running a mace instead, maybe dealing a little bit less damage, though I would say there's not that big of a damage difference end game between the two, just because of how trauma stacks and can work and stuff like that. Like you're literally permanently stunning stuff with a mace, so it's just so much safer. And in the current atmosphere of the game, especially with Alec having ripped 3 times already, yeah, maybe the defense is worth it, maybe. I would say if the current situation, like with Arch Nemesis and all sorts of stuff like that, wasn't happening, I would probably just stay axes. But with how cracked the game is right now, I will probably look to pile drive at some point. Yes, that is my current plans. Anyway, with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the first episode of the build diary. Hopefully there is a second update. Hopefully this character doesn't die. But yeah, level 84 juicing, gonna be live on Twitch directly after this video goes up. Hope to see you guys over there. If you're enjoying the content, feel free to leave me a subscription. That came out weird. I always bork the endings. Also like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you disliked it. Feel free to leave me a comment. I do read all of them. With that being said, I'm gonna leave you guys here. See you in the next one. Bye everybody, take it easy.